although we're talking about this topic, we wanted to play like role-playing where I'm after the number and telling you what to do.
Hey everybody, we're going to start in 2 minutes. Just 2 more minutes, please.
There you go. I like that. I like that a lot.
Like I'm rolling when that happens. Really hard.
And first thing you do is higher up in the situation.
Hey Len, how you doing? Good, how are you?
He didn't realize all that.
See you in a second.
Did they ever find out that it was public?
Yeah. We captured text from the chat.
Well, he's got another book that they did.
Yes. Yeah. That could give us leverage to be a little more.
We got it.
Such a long drawn. Yeah, right. Marcel. Door open. Never mind, door open. Allison, Michael.
Yeah.
Can they hear me? Can you hear me? Oh, here, Jasmine. Drive safely, please.
I was I was making my day.
Let's start it up.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Michael really supported the beginning of that project.
Gotta get both sides. Gotta get 90
That side's harder. That side's harder. See, I can't, it's not coordinated.
I had a really good music yesterday at the festival.
All right, let's start it.
We did a workshop.
Can you? Oh, there is probably a delay.
Yeah. We got it. We got
Are
it.
we good now?
We got it.
Oh, yeah, in the chat.
Go.
Oh, wonderful.
We got it.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to the inaugural Social Change Theater Festival. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and lives to show up. First off, we just want to do a quick round of thank yous. Yesterday was a very hectic day. Today is another one. But there are folks that have been supporting us that we want to take a second to make sure to say thank you to. Number one, Carmen, you got to put the phone down. We're looking at you. Carmen is one of the associate directors with Still Point Theater Collective. Her help in, honestly, anything that has to do with like money and anything outside, I just go, Carmen, please help. Here you go. And Carmen makes magic happen. So please, one more round of applause. We got Daniel Beck there on the camera, Daniel is recording all the events and taking pictures today. If you don't know, the festival is being streamed through HowlRound Theater Commons. And when the festival is over, the videos that we send them are also going to be uploaded onto their database, website on the internet, and you can go back and watch all of these. Is that what's coming?
That's the playback.
Oh my goodness, that is okay. Okay, all right, so sorry. Daniel, the streaming on HowlRound, and so it will be up after. So if you want to go back, if there's any panels you missed, or you're just really interested in finding and watching them again, you can go online to HowlRound in about a week or so, and they should be up over there. And one of the other people I want to say thank you to is Isabel. Isabel is one of the theater production interns and has been invaluable in honestly making sense of all the things that I said in the beginning. I am at the feet of the people who are willing to be in service. Thank you so much. One more round of applause for Isabel. And then, maybe saying this earlier jokingly, but it was a dead serious manner. Up until like about 3 hours ago, we didn't know if we would be fully in the black for the festival. So we'd like to say thank you to the Philanthropic Ventures Foundation, to the McMullen and Kim Charitable Trust, and a few individual thank yous: James Avaliotis, Joey and Liza Haynes, Carson Becker, Seabury Foundation, Paul and Mango Foundation, Sarah Ailey, and an anonymous donation. We are only here and able to do this because of everyone's gratefulness, kindness, giving. So thank you all for being graceful enough to give us your time, your energy. And on that note, I will hand it over to Nate Smith, the leader of the Six Fest.
Howdy, howdy. I won't spend a long time introing myself because it's irrelevant, but I am a company member of the Still Point Theater Collective and very grateful to be here with each and every one of you on this stage for the first event. So if we could have everybody who's sitting out there, even if you're eating, it's fine to eat on the stage. Stay low key. If you brought in something with you, take it off. Like leave whatever you were doing, whatever concepts of like sitting at a presentation behind. This is an open forum. We do have a couple amazing facilitators, including 2 joining us by Zoom, and maybe more Zoom attendants like Jasmine. But after we say a little bit about the subject at hand for a couple of minutes each, we're going to open it up to all of us because there is a lot of brilliant people in this room right now. Everybody in this room is brilliant, and so far all of the events have been turning the house lights off and hearing from amazing, brilliant people on the stage, and only getting to maybe 1 question or 3 at the end. So we're going to be doing the exact opposite for this one. We have a little bit of structure provided for the conversation, and I will go through that in a moment, but please, after having taken off whatever things you don't need to have with you in the room, take a moment to take a deep breath and appreciate that we are here gathered for some of what I consider to be the most important, beautiful work in the world that I know that you all care about or are adamantly involved with. This talk is called Not for Profit, Theater for Our Times. The thought came to me originally, and then I will be kicking it over to the other facilitators. The thought came to me as I've been working in the nonprofit arts for the majority of my professional life, the entirety of my professional life, and starting to learn about our history that I didn't really well know. Like I knew the history, a little bit of productions, but by meeting more people, like everybody who's in this room, somebody pointed me to a book called Arena by Holly Flanagan, who was the head of the Federal Theater Project, which was a part of the New Deal under FDR to bounce back from the Great Depression. It's the only time we've had a fully funded federal theater in this country, which every other major developed country has. And lo and behold, the attachment between funding and being political is why we lost that. The right wing did not like what FDR and the left were doing, very similar to times we're in now. And you can see the history of that over the last 150 years, bringing us into this very room, impacting each and every single individual's life in this room. Every other, I hate the word major developed country, there's just not, I don't know another way to say it, backs their arts. I met a poet in France who was backed by the French government for his work as a poet. He would go into prisons. It wasn't all just like him standing on stage with his own poem. It was amazing work, but that is where the genesis for this idea came, especially with the concept started about a month ago, and then Donald Trump came in. And I probably don't need to tell anybody in this room what is happening right now. That, though, is my position. That is my inspiration for this conversation, and that can be totally left behind right now. That, you do not need to take what I have said as the leap. We are here to hear from each other and to listen and learn from each other. So I'm about to kick it over to two really, really amazing thespians. We'll go digital first, starting with Allison, and then over to Michael, who will give 3-minute intros themselves. And then we've got 2 more facilitators alongside me in this room. We will each have 3 minutes to speak. Just like I'm doing right now, it's very easy to launch into a tirade. So we're going to be, thanks to the help of Jacqueline, our lovely timekeeper. If you have anything you would like to say at any point in the middle of somebody talking, you don't need to draw all the attention in the room to yourself, but put your hand up if you would like to get in the queue to speak. And you will be next in line unless one of the facilitators raises their hand in response. We're here to lightly, I pull each person to think of 2 or 3 things that might be relevant to the topic and to jump in whenever they want. So if a facilitator raises their hand, or if you ask them a direct question, they will respond next and jump to the front of the queue. Does that make sense? How the queue works? Raise your hand, get in the queue. Jacqueline will call on you when it's your turn, and we'll also signal when you're at 3 minutes. I think that a 1-minute mark helps, just as a gentle reminder that you're 1 minute away. And if this format becomes not needed, we will drop it. If the conversation is actually flowing a different way, if we all sense that we don't need a timer or a queue anymore, we'll drop it. But I think it's good to at least start with it, not keep the whole time. If somebody could also, if you need to leave, there's going to be people leaving for rehearsal. If you're eating, that kind of stuff, this is relax. It's an important room for us to come together first and foremost. So I'll kick it over to Allison and Michael, and then introduce us to our in-the-room facilitators as well. Thank you so much for being here.
A little bit of history, and maybe I'll touch on that a little bit. First of all, thank you everybody for being here. My name is Allison Perry. I use she, they pronouns, and I am co-founder of Cornerstone Theater Company, and I worked with them for 20 plus years. Cornerstone was a theater that moved to different communities and did plays with the people in the community involved in all aspects of putting on the show. And they still to this day have a pay what you can model for their performances. So that's one way of doing it. Then I went to work commissioning history plays at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, which is sort of the other end of the nonprofit specter, which has probably a larger percentage of its income from ticket sales than most other theaters in the country. I work not so much in the theater anymore, but I do work still in the nonprofit world, doing a lot of stuff on climate change, and see how that, that financing world is very much endangered, as is ours. And that's something I did want to just mention we could talk about more. I think that the philanthropic model is disintegrating, it's failing. And so the question is, what do we do instead? And I think Michael is going to have a lot of good ideas about that, as will everybody, just in terms of how we, a community we can all rise up through community and all rise up through a more integrated and interdisciplinary, that's the wrong word, intersectional approach to funding than we traditionally take. Because funding is important not just so we can do the work, but so we can feed our families and have health insurance and have a lack of precarity in our lives that we were just talking about yesterday. is hard to come by in this business. And I'll stop there.
Okay, that means my friend is giving me a very strong moment. Okay, so my start is that I met Allison Carey in January of 1990 when I auditioned to play her husband in a Cornerstone Theater production in Washington, D.C. I was not cast, but they took pity on young artist me, and I became Bill Rausch's assistant director on that production and started a lifelong friendship and relationship with all of them, and began to be mentored by Cornerstone into the field. My name is Michael Rode. My pronouns are he, him, his. I was the artistic director and co-founder of Sojourn Theater, a theater company that worked for about 24 years around the country, making original, devised, and community-engaged work. I'm also part of an organization called the Center for Performance and Civic Practice, which is a collective of artists who work with institutions, government, and nonprofit around the US on system change and institutional transformation kind of projects. But I think maybe for this conversation, I'm grateful to be in this conversation with you. I'm sorry I'm not there. I lived in Chicago for a while, and I'm sorry I'm not there at this particular moment, and I'm up on the screen. But I'm really interested in hearing from folks and being in dialogue, not sort of about how nonprofit makes theater possible to produce, but how lots of different models of organizational structure and financial possibility allow us to collaborate across sectors and fields and disciplines, and in particular, allow us to work in municipal spaces, public health spaces, education spaces, housing spaces, equity spaces, and how we are sort of not just looking to fund our artwork for our studios, rehearsal rooms, and stages, but how we're actually looking to support ongoing collaborative work that brings people together, organizations together, builds coalition, and uses the act of theater making as well as the production of theater to make healthy process around problem solving, around envisioning healthier and more equitable futures. And I spend a lot of my energy as an artist doing that kind of work and thinking about that. And I'll finish just by saying it in case it's useful later. I've spent the last several years out in Montana, where I moved a couple years ago to start a lab at a university called the CoLab for Civic Imagination. And the project we've been focusing on the past few years is a touring behavioral health theater and community residency project where we partner with behavioral and mental health entities in all sorts of systems. We have a devised show that's participatory, but we also do workshops in community with youth and adults. And maybe most importantly, a part of that project is the hosting of a coalition meeting for folks who see themselves as health stakeholders around the communities, mostly small rural communities all around the West. And that work is really teaching me how hungry people are for work that is connective and for work that is specific, that sees them and that allows them to co-imagine and co-design practice, not just ideas. And I'm interested in how we're not talking about the not-for-profit theater ecosystem. We're talking about how theater as a practice exists in a larger ecosystem, one of solidarity and intersectionality, and one of new practices and broader impacts. So I will pass on.
It's important to have digital national representation, not just all be here or together. I'll kick it over to Joni and Triana, who are also invited to be here in person.
Well, hello. Thank you all, and it's lovely to see you again on the screen. Hello to many people in this room. I'm Joni Friedman. I'm one of the co-founders of the Civic Actor Studio, which is a pun. Anyone taking civic action, which relates to Michael Rose's work, is a civic actor. Guess what? That's what you do. But it's also a nod to the Actor Studio of New York City. So this idea that there can be a place, a community where you can come for growth and renewal and other amazing people. The Civic Actor Studio is about to have its 10th cohort. We offer a free 4-day retreat for the kinds of people who are trying to make Chicago in particular, and even more particularly on the south side of Chicago, a better place. That can be volunteer leaders, it can be executive directors, it can be journalists, philanthropists, podcasters. We've had a whole range of different kinds of civic actors that we partner with, and then from the group that that emerges, new civic facilitators are born. And so because we're located within the University of Chicago in the Office of Civic Engagement, whose role is to try to connect the university to the community in meaningful ways, I love that it is a self-growing, like, what's that called, a sourdough starter that keeps growing and growing. We've been able to reach almost 200 individuals, and out of that have more than 21 paid facilitators, so they get jobs out of this too. Two of whom are in the room today. You'll hear from them more, but what I find really exciting is that I grew up in Evanston, going to the Pivot Theater and learning about how Viola Scolan's work from the New Deal really used theater games in order to create spaces. And then I worked for the Redmond Theater, literally out of this building. This is the first time I've come back since I worked in that capacity before they moved to their other space. And I ran their community arts program on the west side called Drum Girls that paired middle school girls with professional women artists. Thank you. Is that 1 minute or 3? Thank you. Anyhow, I've spent my career drawing upon the magic of creating ensemble-based theater in order to help build communities of really amazing people doing really amazing stuff. And so I'm delighted to be in the room because my goal is to learn more about what you guys are doing, what else is happening in Chicago, and how the Civic Actors Studio itself and the facilitators that have been nourished and grown up in the work can be of service to the city of Chicago and beyond.
Hey everyone, my name is Katrina Dion. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Scorpio sun, Sagittarius rising, and Leo moon. That matters to you all. Yes, absorb it. I work with Free Street Theater, where I'm the producing artistic director. I've been there since 2013. If you don't know about Free Street, we've been around since 1969 here in Chicago. Came from the back-to-back riots here in 1968. Before I talk about where we're at today, I think something really cool in this conversation about Free Street's 56-year history is that I think the organization has been sort of a constant investigation in what it means to be a social justice theater in Chicago, and constantly kind of shifting maybe the priorities or what the work looks like to match the moment. So in the 70s, that was like a truck that would pull up in neighborhoods and they would perform musicals like in neighborhoods across the South and West Sides. In the 90s and 2000s, that was really just a youth theater company specifically, at a time when funding was really being stripped from CPS schools. It was one of the first places to pay and use to create work. And now we really have this kind of multi-pronged approach where we identify as an arts and culture organization that's FEM-led, that's focused on the health and well-being of the South and West Side. So we do that through these like sort of multiple ways of long-form production work. We also do a lot of mutual aid work. We're committed to paying everyone that works with us minimum wage while doing all of our shows. Pay what you can. So we say we have the worst business model in the world. But I think what's important about that is, for better or worse, like our funders are always like, why aren't you spending more time fundraising? And we're like, we're more interested in thinking about how every dollar we have can go back into the economies that we're a part of, whether that's the people shopping locally, really making sure that we are investing in a thriving Chicago rather than being focused on the fundraising. So we don't love that all the time, but it's what we're doing. We also have a deep commitment to environmental justice, working with Chicago artists, queer artists, BIPOC artists, youth artists, and really investing in those communities. So to just kind of harken back to what Nate was saying earlier about like this current moment, we're really investigating like what can we be doing to make sure that all of our people feel taken care of? What trainings are we taking as staff to make sure our people are taken care of? What are we asking our board to do to make sure staff is taken care of? Like I literally led a board meeting last week talking about what is like a severance package we can create in case like our nonprofit status is taken away and we need to sunset the organization. Like I know that might seem a little bit like I'm, you know, flashing forward to a scary reality I hope doesn't exist, but I don't want anyone that works with us to ever be afraid that we're putting them into a compromising position. So that's like a really kind of current combo for us. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much.
We have a question in the chat about the mic placement. Can we get
the mic cannot be closer, so if we can just project in here as best as possible. let's try a collective projection exercise, because I find that even with professional actors, if I just say that, it still doesn't work. If you take a big breath into your belly with me and say, 1. Wow. Nice, so you didn't have to keep repeating, but that was great. Just think of, you are talking to the back wall. That is who you're talking to. There are people you're looking at here, but the person you're talking to is MA in the booth. I know that we won't be perfect at that, so please chime in if we're ruining it. And also, again, evaporate the fact that 5 people who are pre-invited just spoke. Our opening question, if you need inspiration, I thought would be, the name is not, as Michael was talking about, a 501c3 status. It is, if you are not for profit, what are you for? If you would say, if this is the first time you're speaking, say your names, pronouns, and if you are going to talk about your company, rather than what you would put on a grant application, maybe like steer it towards the like, what are you for? So that we are, I know that we will leave this room with really valuable knowledge and contact. The floor is ours. If you're not for profit, what are you for? Or anything that you have been inspired by in the conversation so far.
Hi, I'm Sam. Use she, her pronouns. I am here because I've been trying to think about a lot what Michael said as far as co-design and practice. That's what stood out to me the most so far in the group. As an arts administrator that spent most of my career in nonprofit, I've just been thinking a lot about like reimagining how like service organizations do what they do, and also from a lens of like community building, how are we actually designing practice where community members are fully engaged in those practices?
Community members.
Hi, I'm Anna. I have a question for those who have civic practices and are building that. So, Michael and Joni, the sustaining of that, so going into a community, creating something with them, and then does it evaporate once you're gone, or what happens, I guess, what happens next?
Well, I might put people on the spot, so forgive me, but Jasmine and Sam and Lynn are all participants in the Civic Actor Studio who have then become paid to help do more of it. And we have a lot of questions around what could the future hold. But I think building into the model a way that we don't come into a community and do something. We try to hold the space so that something can be co-created by the people in the room, and then in the best sense try to enable those folks to be the leaders of future retreats. I've been recently influenced by reading some stuff about The Sabbath by Abraham Heschel, and thinking about architects of time in addition to architects of space, and what does it look like to be the person that's holding the time for others to build community. But if anyone else wants to pipe in, because you can say different perspective than me, I see it just one way.
Joni is pointing to me, so I'll pick that mic up. My name is Lynn Pace-Green. I use she, her pronouns. And we'll be talking more about the Civic Actor Studio in a workshop later today. But I think to that end, Joni, you talk about giving the space for civic facilitators to imagine themselves as active agents in change in their communities. And so it doesn't look like something that has roots that grow in one spot, but rather that these seeds of change are distributed throughout the community. And I think we all, as civic actor facilitators and cohort members, feel inspired by people that we are in community with now. So we all support each other, as well as feel the onerous responsibility of taking what we have learned in a civic actor studio and going into our own communities, which are, as Joni said, completely different. Like, there are artists, there are educators, there are pastors, there are lawyers who come through the civic actor studio. So those are so many different communities to have impact in. And I think that the work that is being done in civic actor studio particularly is about skill sets that go and proliferate beyond that community and into other communities.
In the room, on the Zoom.
Yeah, Michael has a comment
Michael?
in the chat.
You had a comment?
I'm just typing notes in the chat as I listen because as someone who lives with ADHD
Fairly productively, it really helps me in this kind of moment to just listen and type. So I'm just putting those notes in there. But if you want thoughts, I'll share them. But it feels like we're in listening space right now.
Pointed to you question, but I do invite other people to, of course, we're starting off on a little bit of a...
I couldn't, if the question was pointed at me, I couldn't, I didn't hear a question pointed at me, so I need it repeated.
A question about sustainability after you partner with a community.
Oh,
Thanks. Allison, I feel like I actually want to start with you talking about your deep experience at Cornerstone and other places, and I'll talk about it as well. But some of what I learned comes from sort of how you all were working in community over periods of time and returning, and then I can talk about it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, what the work of Cornerstone, which has changed over the years, and I, to reinforce, I don't work with them right now, but certainly, you know, we actually moved around, which is different from being in a place. And so we would go to a community, we do play with a community, and these were tiny communities that didn't have an active tradition of live theater. And so what we would ask the community is a place to live and a place to perform. And these were in largely rural places where they actually had a lot of empty buildings, which is completely different from working in different kinds of places. I mean, there are lots of rural places in California that they don't have any buildings. And certainly different from working in urban places. So, I mean, I think it's about creating relationships that can withstand the change of doing a show and then not doing a show. How does the projects create mutuality in an ongoing way? And what do people need? We would actually help people start small theater companies, and we leave them a percentage of our proceeds. And so I think there are lots of different ways of doing it, but it's all based on an actually truly mutual relationship, right? I mean, in Cornerstone, we had the great benefit of it being absolutely true that we couldn't do our work without community people in it. It was not at all us being, you know, going off, and we weren't do-gooders. We were theater doers, and we couldn't do our theater without people who had the knowledge that we did not have. And so I do think, you know, there's an underlying mutuality which you actually need to figure out. And then but I don't have the sustainability, except in terms of the kind of work that you do, Michael. I don't have an easy answer. And I also, I mean, I'm very moved by the prompt, if you're not for profit, what are you for? And I actually think it's a lot of people are very clear on that. And I don't want to leave the people who are not able to support themselves in this work out of the conversation. And maybe I don't want to steer the conversation away either from, Nate, what you want, but I just want to make sure that we hold space for that if it's necessary, because we're losing people. The field is losing a lot of people, and sometimes people are expand into, you know, related kinds of works. And I think, you know, embedding artists in the community in ways that we perhaps in a traditional way were not as attuned to the possibilities of it is fantastic. It's perfect. And I think it is one of the keys to the future. But there is also that, like, how are you going to support that artistic work you do with a group of other artists. And so I don't want to forget that, because I think the field is entering into a period of profound crisis.
Yeah, I'll jump on that for a moment. I think that this question of what does sustainability look like when you're working in community or when you're doing projects and building relationships and projects, but in different places at different moments, and there's different projects. I think it has a lot to do with intention. Like what is the intention of the work? What is the intention that you've entered into relationship with? What's the intention or mission of the thing that's happening? I know Civic Actors Studio talks a lot about sort of building capacity of the individual to then sort of do work in an ongoing way. I think about that a lot as well, but I don't think the capacity is just about the art skills that a person brings to their ongoing work. I think about the sustainability of working community as having a lot to do with increasing capacity for coalition during the process or project and beyond. So when people talk about how we measure success or the potential for sustainability, we often think about who are the people who are doing work around a common shared need or challenge, public health, more affordable housing. Like, who are the people in community who do that work, sometimes alongside each other or adjacent, but very frequently in separate bubbles, even in small communities. It is amazing to me in a town of 4,300 people that you will have people doing deep, intense work around behavioral health or public health, and they don't really know each other because everyone, and I imagine everyone here resonates with this, you're just trying to get through the day and the work. You have so much on your shoulders to care for the people in your life and through your work that you're caring for. And it's very hard sometimes to look up and see the other 7 people a mile away, 10 miles away, 3 buildings away, who are doing a related practice with a related desired outcome and set of commitments and values, but not shoulder to shoulder, day to day. So for us, we think about sustainability as bringing people's shoulders closer together and bringing them into dialogue with each other through the process. So even when the show, the project, the thing is done, those relationships are now in an ongoing coalition. And regardless if it's a theater thing that's going to happen there, we're hopefully stitching people to each other in ways that what then continues to happen around that thing that the intention was focused on, they are tighter, they have more shared resources, they have more mutual support, and there are ways for them to sort of learn and grow together. And that doesn't always happen naturally. So in addition to like the facilitative, creative, imaginative work that we are doing in those rooms, we are also attempting to strengthen coalition capacity and connective capacity. And people have an appetite for that and a need for that. And sometimes it takes kind of shaping process and events and shared imagining, civic imagination, like to actually help make that stickier. So that's one way we think about sustainability.
Something really quickly too. I think at Free Street, for every show that we do, we pick specifically a community partner where we are really looking at our play as like a tactic in their strategy for change. But I think that just to say, we view partnership as can be a starting point for a project, but it's never the ending point. And when we are committing to someone as a partner, we are always at the beginning thinking about that longevity of the relationship. And that it goes both ways. So when we're in conversation around partnership, it's okay, here's how this is going to support this project we're making, here are storytelling capacity things, right? All the artistic benefits we all know come along with it, right? But also, here's how we can show up for you at the city hall meeting, at the protest, or the online support, or things like that. And that's commitment that is going to go beyond this finite project or not. And so when we're bringing on new partners, it's adding to an existing pool and then continuing, I think as Michael was saying, with the coalition building, that we are continuing to build coalition amongst those partners. And I think that really helps with the sustainability piece of it, is like that the adding the partners, like we are committing long term to this, regardless of if the project is next month, next year, or whenever.
Yeah, I think just real quick, one of the things that creates sustainability is actually working on a lot of projects simultaneously, because coalitions are hard to maintain. It takes a lot of time and care and love. So you don't want to rush a project, and you have to be holding your collaborators all of them all the time, rather than sort of bouncing in and, you know, getting it all done and then moving on, because that is where things start to fall apart.
Beautiful. I'm going to ask that we have the facilitators backseat for a moment,
Yeah,
so that we hear from, we have two starting off with Hugh. Thank you for your question. We just sort of launching up, but you also raised your hand, so the next time anything you will, we'll go to that. But when I kick it over, you will not already speak. Yes, I think Lisa went next.
Yes. All right, we have a show here at 3, which I hope you all attend, so I have to leave in a second. I'm Lisa Wagner-Carollo, speaker. Still Point Theater Collective. I'm the founder and the executive director. And Still Point Theater is focused on spirituality, social change, bringing all those together for healing. And I'm very intrigued by the original questions that have come up. But I'm really feeling like I've done this. I started Still Point 32 years ago. So it's 32 years of life, 32 years of experiences, 32 years. And I think it's a very intriguing thing to look at, you know, together. And what does not-for-profit mean? What can we? But for me, this would take like a 4-day conference with people meeting in different groups. For me to even begin to scratch the surface of that. And what this experience has been for 32 years, you know? And it's because I've been just sitting here feeling completely overwhelmed, like I don't know what to say, I don't know where to start, I don't know where, you know. But I feel like a longer conversation would be very intriguing, you know? People coming together for a week, 4 days, you know, to talk about these things and really get to the heart of things. Because as you all know, when you're in it, when you're trying to make it work every day, I do try to take a lot of time for my own personal reflection, for sure. And I have a ton of support and people I process things with, you know. But to really think about those deeper issues and to imagine something different, I would take a lot of time and focus and energy.
Thank you for inviting in the I don't know. Especially during a conference, it can be a lot of what I do know. You know, I would really like the space to include a lot of like, this is what I've done, I'm stuck here, like your question. Yeah.
No, there's just too much to look at for me. There's too many weeks of trying to make payroll. You know, too many weeks of trying to dig into your gut so you still believe in what you're doing, you know? Too many weeks of all of that to just kind of, what do I think of this? But I think with more time and space, there's a lot that could be discovered, you know? So, anyway, but I have to go. Thanks. Excuse me.
Hi, I'm Mark Weinberg. I first have to say, hello, Michael. Michael.
Hi, Mark.
Michael and I go back 35 years at least. So I want to build on a couple of things. There was a comment before that ended with imagination. The Center for Applied Theater has been, well, we were for-profit, we became not-for-profit, but we've been around about 25 years. And much of that time in our own community in Milwaukee, we were working with umbrella organizations that handled a lot of the particularly financial and scheduling stability. So there's an organization in Milwaukee called Arts at Large, and they work with school boards and with individual schools, and they have a cadre of artists that do everything from murals and drumming and theater, and a school will come to them and say, we need a project that we have this issue, we have this project, we have this, and they will bring artists in the schools together. And it has allowed, well, 2 years ago, I don't know what they spent last year, but 2 years ago, they spent $880,000 supporting artists in Milwaukee, mostly through the schools. So that kind of coalition, where the arts as activism, not just the theater coalition, just the writing coalition, I think is extremely important. The other thing I wanted to address was the sustainability part. As with many of us, as with many people who work in the theater and the press, early on, things looked like our job was to problem solve. So when we started in the schools, we were teaching artists in the schools for 18 years. When we started in the schools, it was bullying. How are we going to address bullying? How are we going to solve bullying? Bullying is, of course, a symptom. And so we went from how do you solve bullying to dismantling cultures of violence, which is still negative. And it's still something that is backward and problem looking. And when we changed our focus to imagining cultures of respect, responsibility, and empathy, everything changed. Even when we did exactly the same work in the same place. And I think that the key to sustainability, Michael said imagination before, the word we like to use is making our work aspirational. If you know the world that you want to have exist, then until it does, it's easier to sustain work towards it. Because it's not work that is looking backwards at a problem, it's work that is looking forward to the world we want.
Can I just tap on and piggyback to that statement? We talk about it, it's very hard to just share this if you haven't had a felt sense of it. But we talk about the creation of the Civic Actors Studio is for 4 days to hold and build the world we want to live in, so that you can feel what it feels like, so that people can go to whatever constituency they're working with and also have that civic imagination, that kind of radical civic imagination.
Just to interject here.
Please.
When I was doing human rights education, I volunteered in local Atlanta schools to teach children about civic responsibility, civic actions that they could take. The first lesson is imagining the world that you want to live in and imagining what a whole person needs in order to be an actor in that world. So imagination really is key in these conversations about culture.
Probably too soft, so I'll try to finish out. I'm just observing language because I'm a writer, and I'm thinking about the word community. And as I look at the way the world is now, I think it's not inclusive enough for me to think about communities without thinking about the whole world. And I think that I'm going to take away from this that a community is a temporary structure that needs to continue to include the whole, so that we think of ourselves as all one. And I think about the question of what are we for if we're not for profit, and I'm thinking about values and the value of all of us, and that we're in all this together, that we are one, and that we have common ground, and that we have, whether we are sustainable or not, something is going to sustain from what we're doing, and we have to not do harm. We have to do something that is, if it's going to continue, it's going to be better or improved. And I'm also thinking about the practice and not just ideas, the idea that somebody, I think Michael, you were saying, is connective, and that we came through COVID and we weren't connected, and we see the benefit and the value of connecting. And I think that if we can just give that, not so much about profiting from it, but as a value for our world that we live in, that we can provide something that connects people to each other.
I'm Lizzie, and I'm thinking about, well, I'll start with the story, but it's going to be quick. I just did my thesis at Berkeley on educational leadership. And I have written this whole whole, what I thought was a beautiful thing about reimagining schools. And I met with my faculty advisor, a black man, and he said, Lizzie, I think you'll find that if you look into the history of schooling, we don't have to reimagine anything. And he pointed me towards black principals in schools pre-Brown versus Board. So it's like black principals in black schools. And the ways that these principals were like engaging the community outside of the schools, engaging the parents. There was like activism happening within the classrooms, like all this. And I think that led me, obviously, to see the way that my own imagination is, no, that all imagination is rooted in schema. And so if we don't expand our schema or think about our schema as racialized, then the imagination becomes a disembodied act, when really I think there's something historical about the act of imagining. Like what we can imagine is rooted in what we know about history. That was a humbling lesson that I learned in that moment. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation around imagination.
What is schema?
What you already know.
What's the question? Or is it more of a conversation?
It's an open forum. Yeah, a prompt was if you're not for profit, what are you for? But
I'm from Rosary area. If I'm not for profit, I'm for food sovereignty and for the land and for international exchanges or cross borders. And I have seen in the years that I've lived in this city how many people who are working in and keeping multi-million-dollar nonprofit theaters afloat while living in poverty and having food insecurity and, front of house in like a multi-million-dollar show, but haven't eaten all week. And I'm interested in how we can literally feed people at our theaters and how we can make theaters into a place where people know that they will be fed, where people know that their children are safe, and that like we become necessary cultural centers as opposed to much like what Free Street does, right? Like they serve multiple needs and like, yeah, like if your staff is going home hungry, like I don't care about your Tony. And what are we doing about it? That's all.
we have a hand over there.
We have a couple comments from our facilitators.
I don't know if they have more. I think there is a Yeah, we have a commercial theater driven by awards and money. And I don't think many people in here give a fuck about any of that. To a degree.
Go ahead.
You, okay. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Mungaray. I think yesterday, I forgot who said it, but credit to you, I forgot your name. They're like, yeah, some people just don't care about other people's stories, right? And I want to say that with the context was like, very like, yes, speak truth to that, right? Because that's the world we live in. And the flip side of it, I'm like, there's some people whose imagination I have zero interest in like exploring. Because when we talk about respect, when we talk about how do we imagine this, I'm like, whose imagination am I exploring? Am I exploring the imagination of people who want to like deport me? No, I do not. Like, no, I don't care. In the same way, I don't think that, I always like challenge, I'm like, through whose lens are we seeing like, what does respectful mean? Through whose lens am I being like, this is what, it's so funny, after this, there was like an event downstairs, and I bumped into my friend, he's like, you wanna go? I'm like, yeah, I'll go. And I went to this event, and it was like about gossip, which I'm all for. You know, it's information. And I'm here, and I'm like, man, the last thing I saw was like an amazing panel about applied theater in prisons. I'm like, this is so important, and we're struggling to fund this, right? And then I'm over there, then I go downstairs to see 300 white girls talk about gossip. And I'm like, damn, there's so much money for this, right? And I'm like, it's true though, like, this is the world we live in. And the thing is, I'm like, this is what, sorry, you know how I am. So I'm like, man, this is what, when we talk about funding, when we talk about nonprofits, like creating events, this is the imagination lens that we're looking through for who, which is the audience, right? And also, I'm just like, a lot of times, like, I struggle with, I'm like, we want community, but do you know your neighbor? And that's the thing where I'm just like, I think nonprofits should be like abolished, it should be gone, because they only serve like our capitalist system, because you know, you want to take off accountability from actually doing the things you're supposed to do, and let's fund these other things and take that off our hands, right? And so when I think about imagination, I'm like, whose imagination are we serving? Whose imagination are we centering? What does respect mean, right? And like, not to throw in like respectability politics, but obviously like my lived experience is like coming in like as a brown girl from the South Side, you know what I mean? And how do you even, like, how do I play the game of code switching? Which at work, I was like, you know, girls, but I told them, I was like, I stopped code switching, but now I have to learn how to code switch again. I'm like, why? But it's the truth, you know, like you have to, in nonprofit, to be respectable, to be this, to play into the imagination of what is ideal, through what? Through the white lens, right? And so even seeing like the nonprofits as a tool of white supremacy, right? And it's like, how many tenets to that, like what tenets of white supremacy do we lend ourselves to, right? Because of funding, because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like even the power of the written word, right? And I'm like, man, like we never document our things. And I'm sure everybody in this room has had amazing work, right? And so like even yesterday I was like a fangirl, like during certain things, like taking pictures, because it's so important to document everything. And I'm like, otherwise we can't, we have to have it written, otherwise it doesn't exist, right? And so I think when it comes to like, you know, and I think that example I gave of like, yeah, it's already been in history, right? And like how this is not new, right? And just relearning and just also feeding ourselves that information of our ancestors, the good and bad, you know, like that's what's gonna help us really, quote unquote, imagine a just future. So yeah, down with nonprofits, but also please give us money. I want to eat.
We do have a queue building starting over here, but just raise your hand.
I was kind of, there was something that was said which has to do with sustainability and also the $1 million theater companies. My name is Jasmine from I'm an independent artist here in Chicago, and yesterday I got to share about my work with Workers Capital, which are low-wage workers here in Chicago, regular moms and dads and tias and tios and grandparents. And it's so interesting because all of my work began in a very traditional theatrical way as an actor. You know, auditioning. I definitely have my on-screen husband, Gabe, who we were in many commercials with. Your comment made me laugh, Michael, Allison, and Gabe's in the Michael Jackson story on Broadway right now, but whatever. So happy for him. But being in the theater world, and then in the same time doing my work in community as a teaching artist and inviting people over and over again to come see the work with youth or with adults, but always in non-theatrical spaces, and nobody was interested in seeing the work. No one showed up to that work from the theater community. And then suddenly it became like social justice theater time, and they're taking all the grants that are for that work. But because you're an independent artist, infrastructure to get that money yourself. And yet you don't get the recognition of that work because you don't have that Jeff Award, because you're not working in those spaces where anyone's gonna bother to come and see it. But when you see the work that's getting Jeff Awards, you know that your work is way better. And so you just like get pissed and don't go ever to see that other work. But it's like, but you can't win those grants, you can't win them without the recognition that society has decided matters. But if you're working outside those spaces, it's very difficult to get inside, to get the recognition necessary. But then they want our audiences, so they do come to you to be like, will you help us develop the Latino audience? No, you can come, you can bring your audiences to our show, in the park, in the church, in the basements, because they want dollars, they want our dollars. As Latinos, we are big contributors as consumers, but they haven't figured out how to include us in the process. And my theater group would love to perform in fancy spaces because that would be lovely, but that's not an invitation that's offered necessarily, right? So I do think it's like an interesting place, like what do you stand for as a nonprofit? And how do you support a community that's already doing the good work? You know, there used to be that thing that was like a nonprofit that was specifically for being like a 501c3 for nonprofits, and like died a year or two ago. That one thing, I don't remember, it was like out of New York. So I do think there's something when we're talking about sustainability, there needs to be something created to loop in the people on the fringes doing the work. Because like this isn't sustainable for me. I can't keep doing this. I have to like pivot soon because I'm gonna be sleeping under a bridge one day if I don't like create some kind of 501, some kind of retirement fund for myself. Because as I'm watching my workers go through that, as their bodies become debilitated and they have no nest egg, I'm like, oh shit, like there's my future. Like, you know, it's like, I do think we need to create. And what I'm tired of is that we keep creating these focus groups to talk about how arts educators are like in different spaces, like Columbia College did it, like what's that one other arts group that used to be around a long time ago, Ari Arts, what is his name? Anyways, people keep creating these focus groups to talk about us, and no one's actually created the thing to help us. That's problematic.
I'm Lily, my pronouns are she, they, and I'm not affiliated with any particular nonprofit organization. I'm a local artist. I have performed at many like nonprofit organizations though, and as we're talking about, I know you had touched on like not doing harm as being a key piece of the work, and as we've touched on like how tough the times are, the times have been tough, but now, like with like the threat of having 501c3 like status taken away, et cetera, my maybe rhetorical, maybe not rhetorical, depending question is, at what point is the self-preservation of your nonprofit not worth what you're willing to do? That's something that I have seen lately as a person who is not actively sustaining a nonprofit organization but participates in them, is the like loss of entities' values in abandonment of their own communities in the pursuit of us continuing to exist as an institution. So rhetorical or not, up to you, when is it not worth it anymore to just exist? That's all.
Vanessa? Yeah, so I think I'm next on the list. Hi, my name is Vanessa, she, her pronouns. I actually work for a funder. I work for the Paul and Angel Family Foundation. My staff member there. Thanks. But I come from a background of being a staff member at nonprofit theaters, and then, of course, being like an actor, director, freelance, working at these theaters. So I understand that perspective very well. And something I was thinking about as you were talking about, what's your name, by the way?
Elizabeth.
As Elizabeth was talking about, like down with the nonprofit, I was thinking about how this was a structure, the nonprofit theater, like built in the 50s and 60s, specifically primarily by white women. You know, I'm thinking, because I worked at Arena Stage, Zelda Fish Handler, who founded there, was one of like the mothers of that model. And that was a model that suited them at that time where they were at. And now we're still stuck in this perpetuation of this same model that is, you know, 60 years old now, that no longer necessarily suits the work that's trying to be done. And so what I think about a lot is how do we create models that suit us now, that suit our communities, but they have to be financial models so that we can, you know, actually sustain those communities. What are those new models? How are they financially and spiritually sustainable? And I think about a lot how like funders and other gatekeepers use 501c3 status to make our lives easier, not really our lives easier, staff are in a different spot, but our boards, to make their lives easier, they're like 501c3, that's easy, you know, it says what it needs to do, makes the judgment call easy. But what that does is that it leaves behind the neediest and most marginalized groups who don't have access to those systems. So I think what we're kind of identifying here is the fact that because our country doesn't prioritize caring for the lives of artists, we need to emphasize the importance of advocacy and activism that then imagines that better world on a systemic level.
Is there anyone else in the queue?
And then
And then I'm going to kick it over to the digital people after these two, since it's been a while. There's been some awesome comments in the chat.
So hi, I'm Isabeau, she, they pronouns. One thing I wanted to kind of piggyback off of is something I noticed, that I've noticed a little bit, is that there's this weird bias I've noticed in the professional theater world, or the sectors of it, of people being anti-community theater or like thinking of it as lesser. And that's something that's been really frustrating to me. And I also think that that's, like as people have been talking, I've been thinking about how that's kind of part of this whole system, the problematic parts of this system. Because, you know, this theater, community theater, this theater is just as valuable as whatever shit they're doing, I don't know, on Broadway. And, you know, it's just a different type of theater. That experience is valuable, that it is valuable. It's honestly a large part of why I'm here today, both literally and, you know, in this room. And that's frustrating, especially when some of these people are people I've worked with, and that experience is what made it so I could work with them, but they're also still like, but community theater, you know, it's like, why? What is bad about that?
I've been working in storefronts for a while and not storefronts for a while, and I struggle with that as well because like artistically and like our reach, it's really important for us to be doing things in neighborhoods at the scale that we're doing them. However, the storefront theater model in Chicago is built on exploitation and people who could afford to not be paid. And now it's like, I went into tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to have this career, and you want me to do it for $50 for 3 months while I have another job, and so I don't want to do that work. And like until you can like honor that, like because we only have so much time and we only have so much body, and so that's really difficult as an artist because the storefronts are really engaging with current thought and current movements and moments. But in the sustainability, like how do I buy my groceries? Like how do I pay my rent with that model? And I've had experiences where it's like, your theater should close, but it won't because you run it and that's where you get your paycheck and that's where you get your healthcare, so you'll never close your theater and you'll just keep exploiting people. Like, so to yours, is there a workaround cooperative model? Like can we set up a community trust where we can start a universal basic income where you register as an artist, as a civic actor, and you have access to a certain amount of
of income, you have a certain access to subsidized housing, like how can we do that and value the artist